Alright, here we go, coming at you with speed day 2. Feel free to pause that and just take a look at what's on the agenda. If not, it's just going to be my cheat sheet from here on out. Come off of day 1, we did mobilization for ankles, hips, and T-spine. And since I may or may not have just filmed that video, I'm going to pass on that. I trust that you guys watched speed day 1, and aside from that, you guys have seen me mobilize hips, ankles, and T-spine before in this program. So we're going to skip that. I did change up our activation here a little bit. We're going to go some single leg RDLs. So get a little bit of balance, get a little bit of core activation, and get a little bit of posterior chain on this. So single leg RDL, come down, pause it, and return to base. And I'll do a handful on each side. Got a little wobbly out there on that last one, so I need to clean up my act a little bit. Nice thing about these is most people kind of stink at them a little bit, so it ticks them off enough to make them want to try harder, but not necessarily give up. You can also do them anywhere, anytime, any place. Nice. Single leg RDLs, and then I'm going to go with some side plank with rotations. Thread the needle, reach up high. Okay. My rotations were so-so on that. Just kind of being stiff with it, so I'm going to try to do a little bit better job on this side. So reach just a little bit more. Oof. 4. 3. 2. 1. Nice. Now I wanted something that was going to get my core firing just a little bit more. I just feel like that's going to tie into what we have in store for our drills today. So a little bit more active core is what I was going for. And for some potentiation, instead of the marches and some of the skips I was doing in speed day 1, I'm just going to go ahead and mix it up a little bit. Some ice skaters. And then we'll go with pogos. Now on those pogos, I did a so-so job of it. We're going to make sure that we are dorsiflexing, because this is just a great and easy time to practice that dorsiflexion that we're going to be looking for in all of our movements or runs, sprints. Okay, so for our drills today, a band like each of these, or you can maybe do this one and just double it up if that's what you've got. I'm going to take that longer band and loop it around a low base here. And I'll come back to that in a moment. First, I'm going to take my shorter band, I'm going to put it around the center of my feet. And so what I'm focused on here is my front side mechanics. So again, a very common issue is that people are not performing knee drive. So that may be because they're not aware, that may be because they're fatigued. But as exercise scientists, we know that knee drive can be monumental for creating forward momentum, and that the harder we flex, that gives a bigger opportunity to extend, and triple extension is sort of that foundation of power and explosive movement. So again, knee drive is limiting factor, probably not because of weakness. So I wouldn't treat this as something that I need to strengthen. But the hip flexors can be injury prone in certain individuals. So I wouldn't necessarily go for like a heavier, like that was a pretty skinny band, and you'll see why, is that I don't need big heavy bands to make my hip flexors stronger. You could do that, you could mix it up, but most of my emphasis would be on maybe some isometrics or higher repetition sets instead of maybe like a very heavy set of 6 or 10 or something like that. So on these, what I like about this is it's going to challenge me, my posture. And I'm just going to come up and I'm going to do an iso hold here. I'm getting a little bit of ab work here, a little bit of glute work back here, and that hip flexor fires instantly. Such an unnatural movement to resist that. Such an unnatural movement to resist that. Oof. And I'm just going to come up and hold, and I would do 5 to 10 second holds. Give enough time to let it start burning. Gives you an opportunity to work some mechanics as well with the arms. So that would be one great drill that I would do. I'm going to spare you watching me do a big amount of repetitions on that, but yeah, short and sweet. But that would be drill 1. It's just to bring that up and hold it. Similar drill right here. Gives you an opportunity. There's less balance involved, so you're simplifying the movement. I would call this a regression, but I'm probably getting a bigger flexion here. I don't have to worry about tipping over or holding my balance or anything like that. And same thing there. Gives me an opportunity to actually look down at my feet and legs and see maybe what I would want them to be doing, and then I can start to visualize a little bit more. And it has some other benefits as well. So instead of just being a physical drill, then you're starting to gain some insight and a little bit of mental awareness of what your body looks like when you're performing some of these actions. And the third variation I might do would be in a push-up position. So I forgot about that one, or else I wouldn't have kicked it off like that. But just in push-up position here, and this is going to bring the core back into play. And it's also going to mirror sort of that starting acceleration phase on a sprint. Especially sometimes we fall down on the ground, we got to get up and start sprinting again, right? So more or less the same movement, just a few different variations, and you could also pair it with some of the sidestepping work that we were doing in Speed Day 1 in our warm-up. So small investment, but some good fun tricks there. Okay, resisted knee drives. Again, I don't feel that most individuals' hip flexors are weak, and that's why they are performing suboptimal knee drive while they run. But going in and focusing on them does build them up, and it makes sure we take care of that, and it helps cross that off the list. But what it also does is it helps raise awareness of the body and look at some other issues. So maybe an individual's not raising up their knee because they don't have the mobility to do that. Maybe there's something going on in their hips. Maybe they don't have the stability in their core, and the higher that knee comes, it throws them off, and it destroys the rest of their posture. So slowing things down and doing something resisted Yes, it's going to make the hip flexor stronger, but it's also going to do some of these other great things, such as challenge our core, make us aware of our form, maybe highlight some other weaknesses. So again, this is a pretty light band. It's definitely, that's a lighter stress. It's also a different angle of pull, so it's not the same thing. It's a lighter stress than what that was. And so what I would do with this is you could get them marching. I could maybe put one around each ankle, and you could throw pauses in there. You could throw in single leg reps only. Again, these aren't heavy. I'm not doing 6 to 10 for maximal weight. But if you have maybe a history of hip flexor strains, the hip flexor is not they're more of a tendinous patch of tissue. That's why really big, strong individuals don't have bulging hip flexors. Excuse me. They might have massive quads, and then the quads sort of taper down to their waist, and then they build back up above that. But on the hip flexor, we're talking about more of a tendinous tissue, and that tendinous tissue, as we've reviewed in the past in this program, tends to benefit a little bit more from lighter intensity, higher rep activities. So maybe you're doing sets of 20 or 30 on that. So that can be a great movement as well. And then while you're in there, you can get creative and do some other things with that. But that's just something simple that is probably not solving the hip flexor problem, but it can cross it off the list. And again, if you've got hip flexor issues, doing a lighter weight for almost like a rehab or a prehab activity, that focuses right in on those issues. When I used to play soccer, almost every season I would get hip flexor strain, whether it was from kicking or sprinting or whatever it was. So that's something that can kind of derail an athlete, and it's such a simple activity to sneak in, and it doesn't have to be a big part of a lift day, but maybe they just take a band and throw it in their pack, and they do that every once in a while. So just simple and easy, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good thing to do. Most athletes will never really need to do that. So I don't know how frequently I would bring this in for the purpose of strength training, but I would bring it in frequently for teaching, for working on frontside mechanics, which we're kind of doing today, is we're emphasizing those frontside mechanics. All right, a few more drills. Now we're going to get into, as opposed to our frontside mechanics that we were just working on with a couple of those band drills. I talked a lot about the hip flexors, but really I was emphasizing the frontside mechanics in the lower body. We did some arm work on our last speed day 1. So between those two, we've crossed off some mechanics. Now I want to talk about force output. That's going to be the emphasis for the next few drills. And for force output, we're going to do some prowler pushes, some box blasts, and some bounds. So prowler pushes can be moderate weight, and you can go crisp and brisk and efficient like that, or you can load up a bunch of plates on here. I'm going to put a video of James Harrison from the NFL. He's doing like 1,000 pounds or 1,200 pounds or more than that. He's got like a huge collection of plates, and it's ridiculous. But we can load it up and create strength. And if we think about that, a lot of times we bring our athletes into a weight room and we want them to run faster, so we squat them or we deadlift them, or we have them do hamstring curls, or we have them do calf raises, whatever it is. But when you put them on a prowler like that, you're taking out a lot of the guesswork, and you're basically just saying, here's your running mechanics, now they're resisted, and now perform the same movement that you do when you're out running. So I'm a pretty big fan of that. I feel like it's a shortcut, and it's something that I've been a believer in for quite a while now. Again, that's Coach Joe DeFranco really brought. He sells that idea, and he makes a great case for that. He discusses a sort of a small test group that he ran, where he does contrast work, where he'll do prowler pushes and let them rest, and then they'll sprint, just normal sprints afterwards, and he shows how it helps them get faster. So I'm going to build on that more in a few minutes. I was kind of getting ahead of myself, sorry about that. But anyways, the prowler push for force output, and we don't have to be slow. We can push that sucker like a bobsled too. So prowler push is great. Box blasts. Let's see here. Box blasts. We've got triple flexion. We've got triple extension. We can emphasize it in different ways. It's similar to how I've been bragging and really liking the prowler, is that it slows things down and it simplifies them. So as a coach, I can watch somebody do box blasts, and I can talk to them about how I want their arm moving, how I want their knee moving, how I want that dorsiflexion going on. So it's going to have some practical application, and also just makes coaching easier, which I'm all for. I don't want to do something that's more complicated just because it's shinier and cooler. So if having somebody jump off of a single foot, which by the way, put athletes on here and start to watch that knee cave in and dance around while they're doing this, and you wonder why they're not running faster, because all that dancing around that's going on there, they're doing the same thing when they're out sprinting. But this allows us to say, okay, let's keep that knee neutral or even wide a little bit. And when we do that, it brings your glute into play. And if your glute's in play while you're running, it's a big muscle. There's a good chance that you're going to run a little bit faster. And if you're a dynamic athlete, field sports or court sports, it's going to reduce your chances of having an ACL injury or another knee injury, because as your knee rips inward, it gets out of alignment and it becomes vulnerable to injury. So watching those box blasts from different angles, it seems like a win-win situation for the athlete. They're not doing something terribly complex or fatiguing, and as a coach, you get to critique them, and you can watch out for just simple little things like that you can actually impact. So your box blast, simple but sweet sort of movement. And then bounds. Bounds are sort of like a little secret movement that I feel like people forget about, but I love it. Remember, we're talking about force output here. So as we're discussing force output, we want to perform a movement that demands that besides just sprinting. So sometimes it's hard to sprint faster. You know, I might have a coach yelling at me to sprint faster. Sometimes that doesn't help. Maybe the sprint before was the best I could do. With a bound, you can jump further, you can jump higher, you can increase your knee drive, you can increase your arm drive. And I don't mean to be dramatically lacing up my shoes here. I should have done that ahead of time. I apologize, everybody who's watching this, but maybe if you've got a little kid in the room, you can show them that part of the video and they can figure out how to tie their shoe. So with a bound, if you take maybe our big skip that's going on and we switch it over, we're going to start to jump from one foot to another. and we're going to exaggerate our mechanics. We're not going to be efficient in it. On a normal sprint, we're staying as close to the earth as possible. We're leaning forward. We're doing all that. On a bound, we're going to open up a little bit more, and we're going to practice force output. We're going to hit that ground hard, put some strength into it, rip our opposing arm, and try to get a little bit of distance. Let's see how I do. I'm going to take a couple of warm-up sets here. Let's see, I can get about this far. Yeah, so introducing the bound, a lot of times working with a group and you tell them to do some bounding and they don't know what the heck you're talking about. But you introduce it and you almost see some light bulbs go off as far as, hey, that feels pretty good. Like, I can really kind of get behind it. I can get behind my big powerful step and it makes me travel far. I like that. And then what you basically do is teach them how to bound and then get them comfortable leaning forward and make them go through their stride rate a little bit faster, and their sprint improves. So I had like a light little warm-up set there. I'm going to take another one a little bit more aggressive here. And I'll kick it up and do one more. I hope you guys aren't cringing too hard. Hopefully I'm representing a little bit, and I've got good technique and good form. I don't think I was doing a great job of dorsiflexing on that last rep, so that's what I'm going to focus on this rep. Nice. All right, my phone just mysteriously cut out on me after that last bound there, so my bounds were looking okay, but they could be better. And the big application point that I would do, and when I have a speed training session, what I like to do is get my athletes warm. I like to do some instruction or introduce a movement emphasis, such as our arm action or our foot placement or our front side mechanics, or really emphasizing force output. Sorry, I had a little brain fart there. But when it comes to application, I save that for the end because I do all that skill build up and then we utilize our skill in application, right? So that's why at the end of the last video, I did my flying 10-yard sprint, right? I jogged up for a little bit, gave myself a head start, and then I tried to apply my arm action and my foot placement. And then what I would do today, I think I can skip actually doing it because you guys have seen me sprint and you've seen me push prowlers. So I'm going to spare you, but I do want to share a little bit more from Coach Joe DeFranco. And again, he had a prowler push. He's a fan of prowlers. He sort of promotes them a little bit. And he told a story at a conference one time. I went to an elite FTS conference in maybe February of 2015, something like that, out in Columbus, Ohio. And he was out there speaking, and he tells a story about taking athletes on prowlers and having them push a heavy weight and then letting them rest a little bit and then making them sprint a 10 or a 20-yard sprint, and that they get faster. And this makes sense to me because I know about post-activation potentiation, and post-activation potentiation, to remind you, is sort of the phenomenon that we can activate more motor neurons, which help activate more muscle fibers. And so I borrowed / stole Coach DeFranco's methodology with the contrast work with a heavy prowler push or heavy sled drag, and I utilize it with a football team. We did 7 weeks of training on that, so contrast work over 7 times, and we laser timed their 40s before and after, and I believe it was like 76 guys. One guy didn't run faster in the post test, and he had a terrible headache, and he was had a snot nose. He had something. He was sick that day, so he was off. but I had an overwhelming majority of my athletes ran faster. And maybe it was all the other things we were doing. Maybe it was the wall drills. Maybe it was time in the sand pit. Maybe it was just time in the weight room. Maybe it was because we were just running. Maybe it wasn't the power pushes. Maybe it was just the sprinting. But I've been told it works. I've seen it work. I'm a believer in it. I'm definitely a believer in post-activation potentiation, and I love the idea of utilizing a prowler push, which is going to develop strength in the movement pattern of a sprint, and then resting a little bit, and then actually sprinting. So I have seen it work in person, and I'm a big proponent of it. And again, so what I would do, if I was going to force you guys to watch me do this today, is I would load that prowler up and I would push for 20 yards, something heavy, something challenging. I wouldn't want to get buried by it, but I would want to make some smooth, aggressive steps, if that makes any sense. And then what I would do is kind of catch my breath for around 30 seconds or so, and then I'd step up to the line and I would sprint 10 or 20 yards. And I can pretty much guarantee you that if you're doing that and doing it wisely, it's going to work and improve your ability to sprint more quickly. Coach Joe DeFranco also breaks down so that some of that short distance running, or the first 5 to 10 yards of sprints, especially when you're sprinting like a 40-yard dash, because that's sort of his specialty, is helping athletes go to the combine, NFL combine, and put up good numbers. And he finds that bigger, stronger, uglier steps in the beginning of your run help get you there faster, as opposed to maybe standing up and kind of running in place and performing some great movements of what you're supposed to do. Is the data just speaks for itself from what he's seen, is that so that prowler, how it kind of forces you to take bigger steps and exert force in the ground, that's going to have a big application to how your first several steps are in a normal sprint anyways. And again, we've discussed in our lecture, we discussed how top end speed is reached at different points, whether you're running a 100-meter dash or 100-meter race or a 40-yard dash. So again, there's different philosophies as to how you're supposed to be doing it, and then for different lengths of races, you also actually end up, maybe the best way to do it actually differs a little bit. So it's just funny how that works, but it's that combination of art and science. Like I've kind of hid behind that phrase about 1 million times so far in this program, but it's just something I believe in, and I think it covers my tracks pretty well. So speed day 2, we talked about frontside mechanics, the importance of having that knee drive, and as well as that force output is just expressing that strength into the ground and propelling yourself forward. And we brought some drills in, and I would advise that you all get your hands on a prowler. You can push them out on the street, you can push them on turf, you can push them on rubber flooring. If you've got a buddy with a car or a truck, and you put your hands on the trunk and push it, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. So as someone who's had a lot of cars who break down, I know from experience that pushing that car feels very similar to pushing that prowler. So that's all we got. Pretty short and sweet for speed day 2. Thanks, guys.